When most people think about a reliable car, the same names instantly come to mind. Brands like Toyota, Honda, and Lexus have built an almost untouchable reputation over decades. The idea is simple in people's minds. If you want a car that starts every morning without drama, one that won't drain your wallet with constant repairs, you choose Japanese engineering. That belief has been repeated so often that it became a kind of global rule. But what almost nobody noticed is that the automotive world has been shifting underneath that assumption. While consumers continued trusting the same names, something very different was happening behind the scenes in China. Engineers were not just building cheaper cars anymore, they were studying what actually makes a vehicle last. Not just performance, not just design, but the invisible foundation of reliability itself. Over the last decade, Chinese automakers stopped trying to compete on surface-level features and started targeting the core of what makes cars dependable. They studied failure points, they tested durability under extreme conditions, they borrowed global supply chains, they re-engineered battery safety, drivetrain longevity, and software stability. And slowly, the gap that once looked impossible to close started shrinking. Independent reports, long-term owner feedback, and large-scale studies began showing something unexpected. The difference between established global brands and rising Chinese manufacturers was no longer a canyon. It was becoming a margin. This video is not about hype or marketing claims. It's about a shift that has been measured, observed, and increasingly acknowledged in the real automotive world. Because what used to be dismissed as catching up is now starting to look like something far more serious. And once you understand how deep that change goes, the entire idea...
For decades, automotive reliability was almost synonymous with a small group of Japanese brands. Toyota, Honda, and Lexus became the global standard because they built their reputation on consistency rather than excitement. Their philosophy was simple: reduce complexity, eliminate weak points, and prioritize long-term durability over experimental engineering. This approach worked extremely well in the real world. Engines lasted hundreds of thousands of kilometers, gearboxes rarely failed, maintenance costs stayed predictable. Over time, this created a kind of trust that spread across continents. In many markets, owning a Toyota wasn't just a choice, it was considered the safest possible decision. But this reputation wasn't built overnight. It came from decades of refining manufacturing processes, tightening quality control, and learning from past failures. These companies became extremely good at building predictable machines, cars that didn't surprise you, cars that simply worked. However, that same stability also created a hidden weakness. While these brands optimized reliability through refinement, the rest of the world was slowly entering a new phase of automotive evolution. Electronics, software integration, hybrid systems, and battery technology began to reshape what a reliable car even meant. And for a long time, Japanese brands still dominated because they had experience on their side. But experience alone does not guarantee future leadership, especially in an industry where the definition of reliability itself is changing from purely mechanical durability to a mix of hardware, software, and energy systems working together. That is where the story begins to shift, because while the old reliability empire was refining what already worked, a completely different group of manufacturers was preparing to rethink the entire concept from the ground up.
At first, Chinese cars were mostly associated with affordability rather than quality. They were seen as budget alternatives, not serious engineering competitors. But that perception began to change when the industry itself started evolving in a very deliberate direction. Instead of trying to reinvent everything from scratch, Chinese manufacturers began studying what already worked globally. They integrated internationally proven components, licensing transmissions from suppliers like Aisin, adopting platform knowledge from established European engineering structures, and building partnerships that gave them access to mature automotive technology. Companies like Geely even went further by acquiring and learning from established European brands, absorbing engineering philosophies rather than simply copying designs. This created a hybrid development model where Chinese vehicles began combining global reliability components with rapid domestic innovation cycles. At the same time, export testing became a major factor. Vehicles were no longer designed only for the domestic Chinese market. They were being pushed into Middle Eastern deserts, Southeast Asian humidity, Eastern European winters, and African road conditions. These environments are significantly more punishing than controlled urban markets, and they forced manufacturers to strengthen durability at every level. What emerged from this process was not just cheaper cars, but structurally improved vehicles built under real-world stress conditions. Engines were tuned for longer life cycles. Suspension systems were reinforced for varied terrain. Electrical systems were redesigned for stability under heat and load fluctuations. Slowly, the industry moved away from its earlier reputation and began building something more serious, a reliability strategy based on global engineering integration and extreme condition validation. And that shift set the stage for one of the most important technological breakthroughs in modern automotive history.
The biggest concern in modern vehicle reliability is no longer just engines or transmissions, it is the battery system. In electric and hybrid vehicles, the battery determines not only performance, but also long-term safety and degradation. This is where BYD introduced a major turning point with its Blade battery system. Instead of using traditional lithium-ion structures, BYD shifted to lithium iron phosphate chemistry, arranged in a long, blade-like format. This design reduces energy concentration per cell, which significantly improves thermal stability. The importance of this change becomes clear when looking at stress testing. In extreme penetration tests, where a battery cell is physically damaged, conventional lithium-ion systems can enter thermal runaway, leading to fire or explosion risks. But the Blade battery demonstrated a completely different behavior. Even when penetrated, it maintains stability without combustion or dangerous temperature escalation. This isn't just a laboratory advantage. It directly impacts real-world reliability. Battery degradation, overheating risk, and long-term capacity loss are all critical concerns for electric vehicle owners. A system that maintains structural and thermal stability under damage fundamentally changes how safe and durable an EV can be perceived. As a result, BYD's battery technology became more than just a product feature. It became a foundation for trust in a new generation of vehicles. Buyers began to see electric vehicles not as experimental technology, but as stable, long-term transportation systems. And once battery reliability reached this level of confidence, it opened the door for something even more significant, a completely rethinking of how hybrid systems should work. Traditional hybrid systems were originally designed as a compromise. They combined combustion engines with electric motors to improve efficiency, but the engine still remained the primary source of propulsion. This meant the vehicle still experienced the same wear patterns as conventional cars, just slightly reduced. Chinese manufacturers approached this problem differently. Instead of treating the engine as the main driving force, they redefined its role entirely. In systems like BYD's DMI architecture, the electric motor becomes the primary driver of the wheels, while the combustion engine functions mainly as a generator. This shift changes everything about reliability. The engine no longer operates under constant load variations. It runs in a controlled efficiency range, reducing stress, heat cycles, and mechanical strain. Over time, this significantly lowers wear and maintenance demands. In extended-range electric systems, like those used by Li Auto, the same philosophy is applied on a larger scale. The vehicle behaves like a pure electric car in daily use, while the combustion engine only activates when necessary to maintain battery levels during long-distance travel. The driver experiences electric smoothness without the fear of range limitations. This approach creates a new category of reliability. It is not just about parts lasting longer, but about reducing the frequency and intensity of mechanical strain altogether. By controlling how and when components are used, manufacturers are effectively extending the lifespan of the entire system. And once this hybrid philosophy became widespread, it started connecting directly with another major advantage: platform engineering borrowed from globally proven architectures.
One of the most important but least visible aspects of vehicle reliability is the platform beneath the body. This structure determines how a car absorbs impact, handles stress, and ages over time. A strong platform can define the durability of multiple generations of vehicles built on it. Chinese manufacturers began leveraging this by adopting or integrating globally tested platforms rather than developing everything independently. A key example is Geely's use of CMA architecture, developed in collaboration with Volvo. This platform brings decades of safety engineering experience, structural reinforcement knowledge, and crash optimization research. Because of this shared foundation, vehicles built on these platforms inherit a level of structural integrity that would normally take decades to develop independently. Suspension geometry, chassis rigidity, and long-term fatigue resistance are all influenced by this underlying design. Similarly, Chery's global engine exports under the Acteco family demonstrate how real-world validation plays a role in reliability. These engines are not only tested in controlled environments, but also deployed in regions with extreme climate variations. This kind of exposure acts as continuous stress testing, refining durability through real usage rather than simulation alone. Chang'an's use of Aisin transmissions adds another layer of reliability. By integrating components already proven in vehicles like Toyota and Lexus, they reduce uncertainty in one of the most failure-prone parts of any car. Together, these decisions represent a shift in philosophy. Instead of reinventing every system, manufacturers are building reliability through integration, inheritance, and global engineering cooperation. And while mechanical foundations improved, a new layer of reliability began emerging that had nothing to do with hardware at all.
Of over 50%, not a spike. A sustained upward trend driven by repeat buyer trust. Starting from around $24,000, a Volvo XC40 on the same of over 50%, not a spike. A sustained upward trend driven by repeat buyer trust. Starting from around $24,000, a Volvo XC40 on the same basic platform, $42,000. Explain the gap to me without using the word badge. Number 6 by Atto 3 Un plus 2026. Everything we've discussed so far has been about mechanical and structural reliability. Now, we need to talk about battery reliability, because in the EV age, that is increasingly where long-term ownership anxiety lives. And no manufacturer on Earth has done more to address that specific anxiety than BYD with the Blade battery, the technology powering the Atto 3. Here is what happened. BYD released footage of an independent nail penetration test on their Blade battery cell. A nail was driven directly through the cell. Standard lithium-ion batteries in that test produced smoke, fire, and in some cases, thermal runaway, the chain reaction that turns a battery failure into a catastrophic fire. The Blade battery in the same test? Nothing. No fire. No smoke, no temperature spike worth measuring. The cell just sat there, punctured, and kept functioning. That is not a minor engineering improvement. That is a fundamental structural redesign of the battery cell, a lithium iron phosphate chemistry in a long, flat blade configuration that gives each cell far less stored energy per unit area, dramatically reducing the risk of catastrophic cascade failure. And buyers noticed. Over 61,000 units of the Yuan Plus were sold in just the first 6 months of 2025. That is consumer trust expressed in purchase decisions. The 2026 Atto 3 carries a 59.5 kilowatt-hour Blade battery, delivering 440 kilometers of real-world range, 150 kilowatt peak charge rate, and a 5-star ANCAP and Euro NCAP result. The same demanding tests that European and Australian regulators use on every car, regardless of country of origin. Multiple test bodies, multiple markets. Same 5-star conclusion. Starting from around $19,000 globally. Toyota Corolla Cross owners, I really need you to look at these numbers. Bro, if we are only 6 entries in, and everything you thought you knew about Chinese reliability is already starting to crumble, smash that like button right now. Because numbers 5 through 1 are where the engineering gets seriously hard to argue with. Stay with me. Number 5, Tank 300HI 4T2026. Now we need to talk about a category of reliability that almost never gets discussed in consumer SUV coverage, and that is off-road reliability. The ability to take structural and mechanical abuse in extreme conditions and keep functioning without braking. Because for millions of buyers, their SUV needs to be genuinely capable off pavement, not just in the brochure photography. And the Tank 300 High 4T is where China enters that very specific conversation and earns its place at the table. The Tank 300 is built on a traditional body-on-frame architecture, not unibody. Body-on-frame, the same structural approach used by the Toyota Land Cruiser and the Jeep Wrangler, specifically because it distributes chassis stress differently and survives repeated off-road abuse better than monocoque construction. The approach angle, departure angle, and water weighting depth figures match or exceed the Land Cruisers at a fraction of the asking price. That is not marketing, that is measurable geometric capability. The High 4T powertrain pairs a 2.0-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with a plug-in hybrid electric system producing a combined 430 horsepower. And here is the reliability insight specific to this configuration. The electric motor handles low speed, crawling through technical terrain silently and with precise torque delivery. The combustion engine is not being stressed at idle low-speed loads, where petrol engines are inherently less efficient. The result is less thermal stress on the engine in the exact conditions where off-road vehicles typically suffer most slow, sustained, high-load crawling. It is a smarter powertrain architecture for hard use. Great Wall Motors' parent brand, Tank, has positioned this specifically against the Land Cruiser and the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. And in comparison tests within China, it has matched both on core trail capability metrics. Inside, you get diamond-stitched leather, a 12.3-inch central display, Harman Kardon audio, and ventilated front seats, genuine luxury in a body-on-frame truck. Starting from around $30,000, a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon starts from $50,000. The Jeep cannot do what this does for anything close to this price. And the Jeep hasn't been voted a JD Power quality leader in recent memory. This has number 4, AI2 M8 Rev 2026. Now we step into the category of software reliability, and I want to explain why this matters more in 2026 than it ever has before. Your SUV is no longer just metal and rubber. It is increasingly a software platform on wheels. The navigation system, the driver assistance suite, the battery management, the climate control, the infotainment, all of it runs on code. And code, like any software, needs patches, improvements, and updates to stay reliable. If your car cannot update itself, it gets progressively worse relative to its launch quality. It falls behind. Bugs that could be fixed stay unfixed. Features that could be improved stay static. The AITO M8 Rev addresses this head-on because it is powered by Huawei's Harmony OS ecosystem. Over-the-air updates deploy automatically, resolving software bugs and adding functionality without requiring a dealer visit. This is the same update philosophy that makes smartphone ownership manageable. Your phone gets better over time. The M8 operates on that same principle. And Huawei's ADS driver assistance platform, built into the M8, uses multiple LiDAR units, alongside cameras and radar, to create a redundant sensor picture of the world around the vehicle. Redundancy is the engineering word for reliability. Multiple ways to see the same thing means one sensor failure doesn't create a gap in the safety picture. The AITO brand has crossed 750,000 cumulative deliveries, 22,900 M. 8 units were delivered in August 2025 alone. That volume proves the product is not a niche experiment. It is a mainstream vehicle that real families are trusting with real daily use. The REEV powertrain means you drive on electric motors always, with a compact range extension